Well, welcome. I'm so glad you took the time to join us today, and you will not be disappointed. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and I'm joined today by Andrea Vallely. We're going to be talking about negotiating better relationships with your kids and how to negotiate your interactions with your kids to make them more resilient. So welcome, Andrea. I'm so excited about the conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes, this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. And for those of you who don't know, Andrea is the co-creator for Shift Happens for Teens. She's an award-winning blogger. She's appeared regularly on CBS 12 as a leading mindset expert. She does lots of radio stations and podcasts, getting the word out there. And she's been coaching for almost 2 decades now, working with CEOs, with teens. She offers retreats. But in particular today, we're really going to be focusing on that relationship with your kids. So, Andrea, I think many people, one of the roadblocks that I hit in sort of with my clients is most people don't think about their interactions with their kids as negotiations at all, but these may be the most important negotiations we have. And we're hearing a lot today about parenting styles, which I think of as negotiation styles, whether it's that helicopter parenting, that snowplow or bulldozing parenting. I'd love to speak to these different styles of parenting and their impact a bit to kick us off.
Yes. Well, I think that the big one right now is the bulldozer parenting. And to me, this is an epidemic.
Yeah.
Because parents are, and innocently, it's coming out of pure innocence. I know that it is. However, they are literally taking away the power from their children. Yeah. What's happening is it's codependent on both sides. So they're creating codependency. They're creating kids, they're actually enabling kids, and they're stifling their bandwidth. So what's happening is kids are learning, oh, I can't fend for myself. Oh, I can't do anything myself. Oh, I don't have the answers within. Oh, everything I need, I'm going to have to ask somebody else how to do it because I'm certainly not capable. That's what they're learning from this bulldozer parenting. It's actually quite a disaster. And one of the things I'll just bring it up, the Felicity Huffman, I heard an interview. It was a little clip and it was about 5 days ago. And what she said was, I wanted to make sure that my daughter had a chance. Yeah. And I thought to myself, make sure your daughter has a chance. How could she not have a chance? Yeah. Like it painted a picture to me of this story of, well, you can't do this on your own, so I better do this for you.
And allow me to be very transparent and vulnerable. And for our listeners, I invite you, as Andrea is talking about this and this epidemic, to really be ruthlessly honest with yourself. If maybe we're all a little guilty of it. And I know I was. And I love that you said it's like innocently. I think it's with all the best of intentions and it comes from a place of love, but we don't want our kids to fail. So we end up, and for those who don't know the term, that's either snowplow or bulldoze. It's like, just picture a big bulldozer or a snowplow and you're pushing all of the obstacles out of the way, or we think we're helping to push all the obstacles out of the way. So our kids get just this straight line. But life is about learning how to deal with adversity and learning how to use those obstacles to fan us on the path to our success. So when we bulldoze that road, I love how you described all of the impacts in terms of disempowering our kids, which is the opposite of what we're intending. So what are some of the other impacts that you're seeing from that?
Well, we're seeing, it's literally stifling our kids. Yeah. So they're not able to think for themselves. They don't believe they have the ability to think for themselves. They don't trust themselves because they're not being taught to trust themselves. Yeah. So, and I also see there is so much dependency on the outside. Yes. For them, there's so much dependency on the outside world. So it's to me, it's just completely stifling them because they don't have the chance to see that they have everything that they need within them. Yeah. But in order to recognize that, we have to be able to use what we have. We must be able to use what we have. It's kind of like, buying a car, right? Or, you're driving your car and the check engine light's on and you're honking at the guy next to you saying, hey, you better check your engine. It's like, no, wait. This is me. I'm the one that needs to check my engine. The answer isn't to get somebody else to check their engine. It's me. Yeah. So they're not actually learning how to use how we actually function as human
Yeah.
beings, the physics behind our psychology. They're not learning how to use that.
Yeah. And how to deal with even the most basic adversity, or how to deal with failure. Like, I think it's one of the reasons we're seeing such high anxiety and stress, which I want to talk about a little later. But I want to circle back and touch on a point when you said about that external, because, and you're talking about them needing like somebody else to take care of stuff for them. And also, I'd love your thoughts are, because one of the things I'm really noticing, and even with our own kids now, again, when I'm recognizing the impact of this, trying to clear the path for them, is they seek external validation, even, let alone internal. Like, rather than having an absolute unshakable sense of self from within, where they can value themselves and have that self-love, there seems, at least in my, I love your thoughts on this, my observation seems to be that they're all seeking this external validation, and only get their sense of self if other people are liking them and approving them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's 100% correct. And it is a disaster. It is a disaster because, again, they are looking outside of themselves for approval. And that will be a never ending cycle.
Yes.
It will be a never ending cycle until they are redirected within, because we have everything that we need inside of us to succeed in life, in all areas of life. It's learning to trust we have an internal genius that's running the show. It's our common sense. It's our intuition. I never met somebody who said, you know what, I trusted my intuition and I made a mistake. But I've met many, many, many people that said, I didn't trust my intuition and that was a mistake. So they're not learning to use this gift that we all have to function in the world at our highest capacity. It's like this internal genius is being crushed. So this looking outside of themselves for approval, it is a never ending cycle. And I know it myself because that was my thing. I thought that in order for me to be okay, I needed everybody else's approval.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
It is
I didn't
exhausting.
know I was okay.
Yeah.
I didn't.
And it's dangerous. It's exhausting, but it also means it sets you up for really bad relationships where you're constantly seeking the approval from sources that are not helping you. Internal genius. I love that, by the way. I want to put a pin in that for our listeners. I love that. Internal genius. Try and encourage that internal genius in your kids. So we'd mentioned stress and anxiety before. And I mean, the stats are like, the numbers are at all-time highs for teens these days in particular. What are some ways we can help build natural resilience in our teens, Andrea?
Well, as a parent, the first thing that you want to do is recognize that your kid has that same internal genius that you do.
Yeah.
So there's a trust that, we, as adults, like, we trust that we can make a decision, most of us, right?
Yeah.
We know that we have wisdom, but our kids have that same wisdom.
Yeah.
So doesn't it make sense to nurture that within them? You got to take the floaties off. You got to let your kid get in the pool and take the floaties off and just allow them. You're there for them. You're not going to let them drown, but you have to allow them to see they have the capability to swim. So the first step is to trust that your kid has that same inner guidance that you do. That's the first.
And just before you go to number two, I just want to, again, for a listener,
let's play with this.
Because and I love that idea of take the floaties off. That is so good. And with that, yes, they might fall down, and that's okay, because then they're going to learn how to get up again. Whereas we want to keep the floaties on to make sure that there's never any mishap at all. Part of that inner genius only comes about if we allow the person to test the limits of their abilities and what's acceptable, and that they'll make mistakes, and yes, there'll be failures, and that is the path to success. So I just wanted to put a pin in that before you go to number two.
No, absolutely. It's so very important. How can we learn how to use what we have unless we actually get the chance to use it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other strategies on building resilience for them? Taking the floaties off. Love it.
Yeah, it's really, it is allowing them to fail and knowing they're okay.
Yeah.
There's not one way. There are millions of ways to navigate in the world. There's not one way. So we actually have to take away the idea that we know what's best.
Oh, Oh, I'm cringing because I'm good. That is so true. I'm guilty of that. Oh my gosh. We do think we know the way. And you're right. There are millions of ways. That is so good.
Yeah, yeah. We have to allow that. We just have to be willing
Yeah.
to allow them to figure things out on their own because we don't always know best. I mean, that's to me, that's like the number one thing in coaching. I don't give advice. I
Yeah.
point my clients towards their inner wisdom, their inner genius, because they know best. You
Yeah.
know, like, and we think that we know best because we are, you know, we observe things and we think, well, my observation must be right. But the truth is, we get 11 million impressions per second. We take in 40, and we take in the 40 that we've been recycling for years and years and years, unless we're willing to look outside of the box and see something different. So, how do we know that our 40 are the right 40 for the person that we're talking to, for our kid?
Yeah.
We just don't know. We don't know what's best for them.
That's
You
so
know,
good. And you
you know,
factor on top of that the world is changing, right? I remember my dad always saying, "Oh, you think things are so different, but it's all the same." And yes, some patterns repeat, but it is a dramatically different world now than it was even a decade ago, let alone 30 years ago or 50 years ago, right? So,
yeah, it's changing and moving so quickly. And in my opinion, this understanding is the most important understanding that we can all take on because we cannot rely on what's going on outside
yeah,
of us.
yeah,
It's evident, you
yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
happening at record speed. So we really need to cherish and get used to our resilience and get used to exposing it, get used to
yeah,
sort of driving the car in this way of knowing no matter what happens, I am okay.
yeah.
It's the idea that I'm not okay, that the world has to look like this, that my life has to be like this, that takes us away from actually being able to enjoy the moment and being able to see that we do have the capacity to handle whatever's put in
Yeah.
front of us. We really do.
And that failure piece is so important, Andrea. A friend of mine had said once, and I love the term, I use it often now. She said, we should celebrate failabrations, right? Where we, and if I had to do over again, like I would with my kids at the dinner table every night say, what's one thing you spectacularly failed at? And what did you learn from it? Like celebrating that so they know that it's okay. I think it's such a brilliant idea. So what are some tips you have for our listeners on how to improve their relationships with their kids? I mean, you can pick the teen years or more generic, it's up to you, but certainly those relationships change, and sometimes we impose our will on them rather than really getting intentional about building relationship.
Yeah, the biggest thing is to listen. Kids want to be heard. They just want to be heard. They don't want to be told, they want to be heard. And it's not that we don't give them boundaries and guidelines, of course we do, but they just want to be listened to.
Yes, that's so
Yeah.
true. I'm just thinking of examples with my own kids where that's happened. And even as they get older, I mean, I'm saying kids, I mean, mine are in their 20s now, but it's that same thing where when I'm able to stop and pause and just totally put myself in their shoes to listen and to truly seek to understand what it is they want and need without
Mm-hmm.
imposing mine, it is an absolute game changer. And just a side note for our listeners, this applies with kids, obviously, but in any negotiation, we are notoriously bad listeners in North America. Generally, this advice will serve you well in your business negotiations, in dealing with service providers. But and interestingly, as bad as we are generally, we're worse with our kids, as if we somehow have some inherent right to be able to just talk over them. So
Yes, yes. Cindy, it is the hardest thing. It
yeah,
really, really is. I find my daughter's 19 and she called me yesterday and I mean, when I tell you this kid talk about resilience, I could a handful of times she has cried and she called me. She's in Chicago. I'm in Florida. She's in school in Chicago in tears. I mean, I could see the tears pouring down her face.
oh,
And she just said, it's like the last semester, it's like the last week, and her roommate was already gone, and she had finals, and nobody was around, and she was feeling lonely. And this is not my kid. I mean, this is so rare.
yeah,
And I wanted so bad to fix it. And I was like, bite your tongue, bite your tongue, bite your tongue. She just needs you to listen. Do not tell her what to do.
yeah.
Just listen. Just
Can
listen.
you speak to that fix it for a moment? Because I mean, I know you've said it already, but when you said that, that just resonated with me that for I think a lot of people out there, they may not necessarily realize that they are that they are codependent, but talk a little bit about that need, that tendency as a parent to fix it and what the implications of that are as well.
Yeah, well, again, that goes into the sort of over parenting. You
Yeah.
know, we want to make things right for our kids. It's a natural instinct. We want to, like, put them, wrap them up and hold them tight and take care of them and make sure that they never feel any pain. Of course. And in most cases, I mean, listen, there are times we must swoop in, and you'll know when is that time. Of course, you're not going to let, again, you're not going to let your kid drown. But most of the time, you want to allow your kid to figure it out for themselves, because you want to show them that they have what it takes to make their own decisions, to figure things out, that they have resilience, that they have access to so many possibilities. Yeah. So that's why fixing it for them isn't giving them the opportunity to see what they're made of.
Yeah.
I
love that. That's so perfect. Now, I read something in yours that you said you have there's the one answer that everyone is looking for, but it's the last place they look. And that really piqued my interest. So I'm wondering if you could share what that's about. What's the one answer that everyone is looking for, but the last place they look? What is that?
It's inside. Okay. It's inside. Yes. Nice. It's the last place we look, because we are problem solvers by nature. Yeah. So we look to, logically, well, if I fix this and if I change that and if we move and if we get a new roommate, I'm thinking about because my kid's in college, right? Yeah. Well, we send them money, we do, all these kinds of things. And again, it's not that we don't help our kids, but we think the answers are on the outside. Yeah. And all of the answers are within. We are so much greater than we are taught or shown. Yes. It's just fact. We have everything that we need within us. And when we open up, when we allow this expansion, so it's our expanded mind. I mean, here's the thing, our brain, fabulous. It's a computer. It has all of our data. We need that. Okay. You're an attorney. You better have all that stuff in your brain, right? Yeah. However, our mind is our inner genius. Our mind is expansive. It's every incredible invention did not come from the computer. It didn't come from our brain. It came from an idea. Yeah. And our ideas come from our inner genius. Yeah. And we are just not used to using this part of our machine. Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about mindset for a moment. I mean, I often say that our first and most important negotiation is with our mindset, and we ignore it sort of at our peril. What are some ways we can help our kids better negotiate their own mindset so that they can, silence the inner critics and make those choices so that they take 100% responsibility for their experience in life? Yeah. Well, the first thing's going to sound really silly, but teach them to breathe. Sounds really silly. But we don't. It's simple. And yet it's so many of the most profound answers are simple, right? And we ignore them. Yeah. We don't take the time. We want to teach our kids to create coherence between the heart and the mind. Our heart communicates with our brain 10 times more than our brain communicates with our heart. It makes a lot of sense to get real friendly with the heart, right? That's nice. This is where our power is. Our heart actually has a memory. They've recently found out. It was found out in 1991, and it was published in 1993 by the Oxford School of Medicine, I believe, that we have the same neurons that are in our brain we have in our heart. Wow. So we want to create coherence. We want to tap in, because again, this is where our inner wisdom lies. Yeah. So the first thing is and it was funny because when my daughter called me last night, I just let her speak. And then I just said, don't forget to breathe. Yeah. Take a breath. Yeah. Take a deep breath in, nose breathe. Yeah. You don't want to breathe in through your mouth. You don't want to get your shoulders involved. You want to nose breathe, because we have a natural reset button. When you breathe in through the nose, a nice long deep breath, and out through the nose, a nice long exhale, you're actually creating, you're speaking to your body, and what the body hears is I am safe. So you're actually communicating to your body, I am safe. So I just did it as you were saying that, Andrea, and I felt the difference. Like I physically felt my body calming down. That's so interesting. Yeah. Yes. And so I love that study that you said about the heart. I hadn't heard that. I think that's brilliant. And imagine what a different world it would be if we had a heart-centered approach to our interactions with each other. How beautiful is that? Yeah. Yes. So that's the big thing. You want to teach your child to tap into this coherence. You want to teach them to be heart-centered. You want to teach them to breathe. It is the natural reset button, and it will never fail you. Yeah. And when we're in that calm, this is our rest and relax state, rather than the fight or flight, which
Yeah.
is what most of us run around in.
Yeah.
But when we're in rest and relax, we can make sense of things. We see there's so many more opportunities than what's right in front of us.
Mm, so nice. Now, what are three non-negotiable you would say are sort of non-negotiable habits for raising happy kids?
Well, no, the first thing I would say is don't do everything for them. You've got
Yeah.
to let them learn.
Yeah.
You must let them learn. The second thing is you want to create guidelines for them. Believe it or not, kids need and crave those guidelines. They need the structure. Years ago, I worked in a treatment center. Coached in a treatment center, and I worked with people with addictions and also dual diagnosis. And the most prevalent learning that I had was that by the time I would see most of the clients, were at least in their 20s, they would say to me, I wish that my parents had given me more rules and structure.
Mm.
They needed it. But what
Yeah.
happened was, and you've seen this before, I'm sure, is that parents are afraid to put too many guidelines in, a lot of times because they want to be their kid's friend.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Or they're afraid of how their kid will act out. So they're pretty loose with the guidelines. And kids actually crave that structure. There's safety in it. So they may give you a hard time initially, but it's the best thing you can do for your kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. And presumably that listening would be another sort of habit for raising happy kids. They feel they have a voice. And and I wasn't aware of it at the time. It wasn't until much later I recognized it was one of the greatest gifts. Like my dad, we used to have really spirited discussions around our dinner table at night. And he was teaching without us even realizing it, my sister and I, that we had a voice and that we mattered, and encouraged us sort of very subtly to, challenge his views and to be able to back it up. And it was a game changer. I think probably one of the reasons I became a lawyer, to be honest, was that absolute unshakable confidence that what I said had value and that I had the ability to make change in the world. And it all came back from those childhood opportunities, for want of a better term. So now much of what you've talked about would definitely increase confidence in kids as well as helping them manage their mindset. Any other tips on how we can maybe help our kids negotiate higher confidence levels for themselves?
You want to ask the questions and allow your kids' answer to be okay.
Yeah.
You don't want to try to change their answer or tell them something different. You want to make their opinion matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, I'm being quiet here because I'm thinking back to all the times that's true growing up where they would voice an opinion and we would somehow feel the need to correct them as if our opinion was the only opinion, right? Which is really, and no wonder there's such conflict in the world, frankly, if we can't even have those discussions. And actually, let's speak to conflict for a moment, because in families, conflict inevitably arises, right? So what are some strategies for negotiating family dynamics, like past some of the wounds with grace and in more constructive ways?
Yes. So, well, first of all, you want to understand when is the best time to communicate. We experience moods, right? It's very normal. When we're in a low state of mind, we want to get out of pain, right? We want to get out of pain. And when we're in a low state of mind, our bandwidth is constricted. It's like being in the basement, okay? You're in the basement. You have no idea what's going on in the world because you're in the basement. That's how our mind is when we're in a low state of mind. It's like we can't see anything because it's dark and dreary and, we can't see anything. But if we got in the elevator, and went up to the third or fourth floor, let's pretend we're in New York City, right?
Yeah.
We would step out and we'd see, oh, wow, there's a little neighborhood here. I had no idea. Guess what? There is a dry cleaner. Guess what? There is a piece, right? And then we get back in the elevator and we go, up to the penthouse and we're like, oh, I'm on an island. I had no idea. Wow, there's the Statue of Liberty. Oh my goodness. There's the Hudson River. I had no idea. So our mind works like that. When we're in a low state of mind, that is not the time to have the talk. But we are so, our ego's at work when we're in a low state of mind. So we want to be right. We want to get out of pain. And it looks like the best way to get out of pain is to have the conversation or force blame or something like that. So the first thing is to know that if I call it in the red because we liken it to a traffic light. It's just easy to remember. If you're in the red, okay, red means stop. Recognize it. and
Yeah.
no, it's not the time to have a conversation. So that's a really big, very easy thing that everyone can implement. I'm not in the right state of mind to have the conversation.
Yeah.
That's so important. Okay. It's also important for the person who may not be in the red, who's sort of the recipient or around the red, to not take anything personally when the other person's in a low state of mind, because it can't be personal.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the red, you can't see your way out of a paper bag. So, your ego's just going to town and you're just spewing things left and right. And, it's one of those times when you're like, oh gosh, did I really say that? Right.
Yeah.
But when you know this, it's like, oh, you know what? Mom had a tough day. She's just super, we need to give her some space. Or, you know what? My kid had a tough day. They didn't do well on a test. I'm just going to give them some space. And then the negotiation is, listen, let's all settle down. Let's talk about this after dinner, or let's talk about this tomorrow. I mean, believe it or not, something so simple as that whole sleep on it
Yeah.
that, we heard that our grandparents said is brilliant. It's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant. So the first thing with negotiation in the home is to make sure that everyone is in a very open, flexible state of mind.
Yeah. So glad you mentioned the when, because in some ways it's so obvious, and yet we don't prepare. Like if we were going into a multi-million dollar negotiation, people would do their homework and they would prepare. Our relationships with our family, with our kids, with our intimate partner are our most important relationships. And yet when we have those difficult discussions, we rarely prepare for them. And one of the models that I advocate is, I call it the 5W model. And it's like who, what, where, when, why. Like decide in advance, who do I want to be in this discussion with my kids? Am I showing up in mom mode, or am I going to want to be in receptive mode? Do I want, be intentional about who you want to show up as, and where you have the conversation, and when you have the conversation? What is your deep why for the conversation? What are the outcomes that you want? And so I love that you have that very practical approach, and it's a game changer, that kind of simple prep. Love it.
Well, I love what you're saying. Your 5Ws, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. But most of us don't have that plan in effect. We just go. You know what I mean? Like we just
It's
go.
true,
And
especially in
that's why,
family.
absolutely. But that's why that breathing
Yeah.
it's a game changer. It's just remember to breathe, because when we're in fight or flight, things don't work out well.
Yeah.
We can get back in rest and relax. We can get there pretty easily.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on emotion? Like what role emotion plays in these negotiations or potentially difficult conversations, and how do you manage it?
Well, emotion is usually tied to the ego. And whatever we're giving importance to, we want to be really consciously aware of that,
Yeah.
right? So when we're giving importance to something that I need to be right, this needs to be this way, we've already lost half the battle.
Yeah.
Because we're not coming from our heart. We're not coming from a place of coherence. So you want to recognize, what are you giving importance to? And you want to take that importance away, because believe it or not, that will leave room for most likely the outcome that you want, or at least the outcome that's going to be most loving.
Yeah.
And caring for everybody.
Oh, I love that. And thanks for calling out ego. I mean, I call it one of the 7 deadly sins of negotiation. And again, whether that's personally or professionally. And, when you were talking about that listening, one of the models I use with my client, I call it the no fear model, is that fear, ego, attachment, and reactivity. Like, be really honest with yourself. What are the fears I'm bringing to the table in this conversation? And what are the fears that my kid has, right? Or whoever you're negotiating with? What are the fears they're going to bring to the table? And how does ego show up for me, and how can I surrender my ego? Just exactly what you said, Andrea. I love that, because we are a very ego-driven society. We're conditioned that that's the way to negotiate, seeing it as a win-lose, as opposed to surrendering your ego. And you enter into the art of fascination, right? Like allow yourself to be fascinated by whatever it is the other person, your kids in this case, wants to say. I love that.
Yeah. Get curious. It's
yes.
That's
yes.
the number one rule for coaching is you want to get curious, because we don't know what's best for someone. We want to be curious and lead them to, again, their inner genius, their inner guidance, because their inner guidance does know, but their inner guidance is not the ego. So you want to differentiate between that, because the ego will just keep us stuck. It's like quicksand, not fun.
That's so good. And curious with our kids. I love that word. That word is so important. Again, I want to put a pin in for our listeners, what Andrea is saying there. Do not undervalue the importance of curiosity when you're in interactions with your kids. come from a state of curiosity. So important. Love that.
Yeah. Something's coming up for me if I have a minute to tell a
Yeah,
quick
of
story.
course.
My husband tells this story and it's so brilliant. And this was back in England quite some time ago, probably like in the 90s, but there was a little girl, I think she was like 6 or 7 years old, and she was kind of causing like a little bit of havoc in the classroom where she wasn't paying attention. She wasn't sitting properly. Okay. And the teacher said to the parents, maybe she was gazing off in class, like she just wasn't involved.
Yeah.
And the teacher mentioned it to the parents. The parents went to a doctor. A doctor wanted to put her on medication. They took her to another psychiatrist. Psychiatrist said, "Oh, your kid, needs medication. She has this." And the parents just something didn't feel right.
Yeah.
So they went to a third specialist. And the specialist brought the family in a room. They had a quick chit chat. And then the specialist, I think it was a psychiatrist, took them out of the room and asked the little girl to stay in the room and brought the parents out and said to the parents, "Don't worry, there's a window here. We're going to be able to see her." But before he left the room, he turned on music.
Yeah.
Walked out of the room. She started dancing and dancing and dancing. And he said to the parents, "There's nothing wrong with your kid. You have a dancer."
Oh, I love it's melting.
And this little girl went on to become the choreographer for Cats, the musical
Oh my
Cats,
gosh.
the choreographer for Andrew Lloyd Webber for quite a few of his
Wow.
yeah. So that's a true story. I'm getting actual chills telling you that.
My heart just melted. And
I know.
imagine had the parents accepted the traditional wisdom and put her on medication, that creativity would have been stifled, completely
Exactly.
deadened her creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yes.
important. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. And I know when my son at the beginning of COVID had a very serious mental health issue and ended up in the hospital, and I had to really take the first couple of, me when really our visits were, it was bad. He was angry and upset and rightly so, and scared. And then I had to go, "Oh my God, Cindy, practice what you preach, and be able to just come from, as you say, that place of absolute curiosity. Like, I'm so sorry. I've been making this about me. I've been defending myself and the steps that we took. Tell me about your experience. What are you feeling? What do you need? What do you want?" And it was a game changer, Andrea, to be able to come from that total surrendering of ego and allow him to vent, allow him to not trust at first, and build that trust by staying in an absolute place of curiosity. So I thank you for sharing that with our listeners. So important. What's one of the most surprising or shocking things you discovered while you've been researching for your kind of programs and approach?
I think the biggest surprise is that I see a lot of parents are afraid of their kids.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest, like, wow,
Yeah.
they're afraid to parent. It's just so different than when we were kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been the biggest shocker. It's like, they don't want to upset their kid. They find it difficult to stick to the structure and the guidelines. They don't want to give too many guidelines. And, what's happening is that the kids have their parents wrapped around their finger.
Yeah.
And, the parents see it as, well, if I push them, they'll do self-harm, which very well may be true. But along the way, the kids learned, oh, this is how I can
Yeah.
get away with it.
Yeah.
So that's where I see a lot of unhealthy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the, and again, for our listeners, if any of you had that little frisson of resistance to that, be open to considering, are you a little afraid of really stepping in to be able to parent? Are you afraid of surrendering ego? Are you a little bit afraid of coming from a place of total curiosity? Are you afraid of allowing them to express their own opinions, even and especially when they're different from yours? So Andrea, this has been fabulous. I've learned some amazing little nuggets here. You've brought so much value to the table. And I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? Doesn't have to be on this subject. It can be on anything. One of those sort of aha moments where you see things differently.
I would say that I'm okay no matter what.
That's
That's
powerful.
been the biggest learning for me, was that, the outside is not telling me how I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
That no matter what's happening in the world, or no matter what's going on, I do have a deep knowing that I am okay.
Yeah.
And from that place of knowing that I am okay, things work themselves out on the outside.
Yeah.
You know, that was my biggest learning. And I'd have to remind myself that it's not
Yeah.
something that you're trained to learn
Yeah.
in the world that we live in today. And it is a very deep truth for everyone.
That's beautiful. And what a great message it ties in so beautifully with this parenting conversation about how to negotiate with our kids, because it's all our kids are going to be okay no matter what. And we want to instill that belief in them rather than jumping into, and they're going to be okay without us jumping in to bulldoze the path, without us being the ones to have to fix everything and impose our views of the world. So what a beautiful tie-in that was. So where can people learn more about you, Andrea? Where should we send them?
My website is shifthappens.global. And that's where you can find me. All of my social media links are there. Shift Happens Global on Instagram. On Facebook, it's Shift Happens. And on LinkedIn, I'm Andrea Vallely. You can also find Shift Happens Global on LinkedIn. And I'm trying to be kind of cool on TikTok, Shift Happens Global. I don't know, it's there. But really, Facebook, Instagram, are my thing. And our website has lots of information on our programs, and you can reach out to me via email. My email's on the website if you have any questions. And we just love to help people. So don't let anything stand in the way of sending a message and say, and letting us know if there's anything that's on your mind that you'd like some clarity on.
Beautiful. And we'll make sure to have that in the links in our show notes, so you can access, if you weren't taking notes there yourself, to be able to reach out and take advantage of all the fabulous resources that Andrea has for negotiating your own mindset, negotiating with your kids and your other relationships as well.
Oh, I just wanted to tell you, I do have something that I'll send to you. It's 33 conversation starters. So ways to just start a conversation with your kid rather than how was your day, So I will send that to you. It's a free download and it's great. It's just great. It just opens the door for more engaged conversations with your kid.
Oh, I love that. What a little cheat sheet. That's perfect to kickstart it. So, and thank you for that generous offer. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. So all of you, make sure to check back and check those show notes so you can grab that download yourself as well and have those handy conversation starters to break the ice so you can start digging into those deeper issues. Now, I'm sure you guys have got lots of value from this. I know I did. There were so many moments that I was just had these little mini epiphanies and ahas. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already, and give the gift of sharing as well. I mean, who can't benefit from these kind of nuggets to be able to improve your relationship with your kids, to have more resilient kids, to be able to negotiate and navigate those situations better. So share this episode. And before we sign off today, just wanted to share some ways that we can work together. If you're looking to upload your negotiation skills, I've got everything from online to group to my signature one-on-one VIP and mastermind experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life, both personally and professionally. If that sounds interesting, check out our website at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book if you haven't done that yet. The same name, Art of Feminine Negotiation. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.